All right, so wands at the ready, everyone, because today we're taking a deep dive into Diagon Alley. Just before Harry's third year at Hogwarts. We've got stacks of your notes and observations about this chapter, and honestly, there's way more to it than just school supplies.
It's true, this visit, it's a turning point for Harry. I mean, he's finally free from the Dursleys, and he's getting a taste of freedom, in the wizarding world. But there's this shadow kind of lurking over everything.
Right, yeah. It's like this up and down thing the whole time, right? Like one minute he's stuffing his face with treats at the Leaky Cauldron, and then the next he's catching whispers about Sirius Black.
Yeah, and those contrasting experiences, that really brings out that coming-of-age theme that's going on here. Harry's surrounded by all the wonder of Diagon Alley, but at the same time, he's brushing up against the darker side of things, too.
Yeah. And speaking of wonder, let's talk about that scene in quality Quidditch supplies.
Oh, yeah.
The firebolt.
His firebolt.
Come on. I mean, it's like the ultimate dream for any young Quidditch player, right?
Absolutely. But the firebolt it's more than just a fancy broom. It represents freedom, a desire for recognition, and maybe even belonging. And it's really interesting that Harry doesn't buy it right away.
Yeah.
Even though he clearly wants it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, who wouldn't want to, zoom around on the fastest broom in the world? But maybe there's something a little bit deeper going on there.
I think so, yeah. It kind of suggests a growing maturity, and self-control, too. Remember, he ends up choosing to put his needs first instead of instant gratification.
Interesting. So it's not just about resisting a shiny new toy. It's about recognizing the value of long-term goals.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like a little hint that Harry is starting to think for himself.
Okay.
To weigh the consequences, what he wants and stuff.
Yeah. So I'm starting to see how this Diagon Alley trip is about a lot more than just buying textbooks and cauldrons. It's about Harry learning to navigate this world that's full of wonder and danger.
Exactly. And speaking of textbooks, we can't forget that hilarious scene in Flourish and Blots.
Oh, yeah.
With the Monster Book of Monsters. Yeah. I mean, who thought it was a good idea to create a textbook that literally tries to bite you?
Right. Pure chaos. Poor Mr. Weasley trying to wrangle a stack of those things. But it also makes you think, is there something deeper to those aggressive textbooks?
There might be. It could be a reminder that magic can be really unpredictable and even dangerous if you don't handle it right. Those books, they have powerful knowledge in them. And knowledge itself, it can be a weapon.
So even in a place like Diagon Alley, where everything seems magical and exciting, there are hidden dangers lurking beneath the surface.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another interesting little detail. That book Harry sees called Death Omens.
Right.
It's not just a random book on the shelf. It's foreshadowing for sure of all the dark stuff that's coming.
Yeah. You're talking about that black dog on the cover, right? The one that reminds Harry of what he saw earlier. Like a little shiver almost runs down your spine when you see that.
Exactly. That image of the black dog, it connects directly to Sirius Black, the escaped prisoner that everyone's whispering about. It plants that little seed of doubt, a sense of foreboding. Even though Harry's trying to convince himself it was just a stray dog.
Makes you wonder if Harry's trying to ignore those feelings because he wants so badly to just enjoy his freedom.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe he's subconsciously pushing those negative thoughts away, He doesn't want anything to ruin this experience for him. He finally got away from the Dursleys. He's found a place where he actually belongs.
Right. But can he really escape the darkness that seems to be following him? I mean, he overhears Mr. and Mrs. Weasley arguing about Sirius Black.
Yeah.
And it's so clear that they're terrified for him.
And that fear, it makes total sense, They believe Black wants to kill Harry to bring back Voldemort. But what's interesting is how Harry reacts to this.
You're right. He doesn't seem that scared.
Right.
Not like the adults anyway. He's more worried about not being able to visit Hogsmeade. I mean, it's almost funny, but it also says a lot about Harry.
It does. On the one hand, it shows just how resilient he is. And maybe even a little denial. I mean, he's faced Voldemort how many times now? So in his mind, what's one messed up prisoner compared to he who must not be named?
But there's also this sense of defiance there.
Right.
He just refuses to let fear run his life.
Absolutely. He wants to experience everything the wizarding world has to offer, even if it's risky. But it also makes you wonder, are Mr. and Mrs. Weasley doing the right thing by not telling him everything?
Yeah, that's a tough one. They're trying to protect him. But could it actually end up hurting him more? By keeping things from him, are they stopping him from really understanding what's going on and getting ready for it?
It's a classic dilemma, isn't it? Protection versus knowledge. And there's no easy answer. But it's a question that's going to keep coming back to Harry again and again.
Man, this is getting really interesting. So we've got Harry on the one hand loving the freedom and wonder of Diagon Alley, but on the other hand, there are all these little hints of danger lurking below the surface. It's like a ticking time bomb, just waiting to go off.
And that tension, between innocence and experience, light and shadow, that's what makes this chapter so good. It reminds us that even in a magical world, every action has consequences. And growing up means facing those consequences head on.
Okay, I am totally hooked. So where do we go from here? What other parts of this Diagon Alley trip are we going to uncover?
Well, we can't forget about his reunion with Ron and Hermione, right?
Yeah.
And then there's that detail about Hermione's new pet, that cat named Crookshanks. There's more to that cat than meets the eye.
Ooh, I feel like some foreshadowing's coming on. We'll have to dive into all that in part 2 of this deep dive. But for now, I'm left wondering, is Harry really ready for what's coming next?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's one we'll keep exploring as we go through Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Welcome back to our Diagon Alley deep dive. Last time we were talking about Sirius Black and how Harry didn't seem too worried about him.
Yeah, it's almost like he doesn't get how serious this all is, even after hearing the Weasleys talking about it. Well, remember, this is still the same Harry who went up against Voldemort as a baby, and then again at the end of his first year. So danger, it's not exactly new to him.
True, but doesn't that make it even weirder that he's so chill about it? I
Yeah.
mean, he's faced some crazy danger before, but he seems more bummed about missing Hogsmeade than running into some escaped convict.
That's a great point. Maybe for Harry, danger just means something different. I mean, how could Sirius Black ever be as bad as Voldemort, right? At least in his mind.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
Especially since everyone keeps telling him Dumbledore will keep him safe. It's like he totally trusts that Dumbledore can protect him.
and to be fair, Dumbledore's pretty good at that. He's a powerful wizard and all. But it does make you wonder, is Harry relying too much on other people to keep him safe?
Interesting. So maybe his relaxed attitude isn't just him being naive, it's also about him having faith in the people he trusts.
Exactly. But it also shows how hard it is for the adults, trying to decide how much to protect him and how much to let him figure things out on his own. Like the Weasleys are really struggling with that.
Yeah, they want to tell him what's going on, but they also don't want to scare him.
Yeah.
But like we were talking about before, could that actually backfire on them? What if hiding things from him makes him feel even more vulnerable?
Yeah, it's a valid point. What happens if he finds out later that they knew more than they told him? That could really mess with his trust in them and make him question if they were making the right calls.
It's like they're trying to keep him in this little bubble of childhood. But he's not a little kid anymore. He's seen some dark stuff.
Exactly. He's faced death, he's defeated evil, and maybe part of him knows, even if he doesn't realize it, that he can't always depend on others to protect him. He needs to learn to be strong on his own, too.
Which takes us back to that moment in Quality Quidditch Supplies, when he wants that firebolt so bad, that symbol of freedom and power, but he doesn't buy it right away.
Yes. That says a lot about how he's maturing. He's learning to think about what he really needs and not just go for instant gratification.
Yeah, it's almost like he knows that real power doesn't come from having the fastest broom. It comes from inside, from building up his own strength.
Exactly. The firebolt, yeah, it's tempting, but it could become a crutch, a way to avoid facing his fears. By deciding to wait, he's showing that he's ready to face those fears head on.
Okay, so we've got Harry dealing with trust and responsibility and realizing that magic can be pretty dark sometimes. But let's not forget about the good parts of this Diagon Alley trip, like when he meets up with Ron and Hermione.
Oh, absolutely. Their friendship, it's like a bright spot in all this darkness. It reminds us that even when things are scary, there's still room for laughter and fun and just hanging out with your best friends.
Yeah, it's like a little bit of normal in this crazy world. They're just kids, catching up on their summers and totally oblivious to everything else going on around them.
And that contrast between their carefree attitude and all the tension, it makes that scene even better. It reminds us what Harry's fighting for, what he's risking his life to protect.
But we can't forget about Hermione's new pet either, Crookshanks. That cat might be more important than we think.
Oh, you're right. Crookshanks and his weird obsession with scabbers, he's not just some random pet. Maybe he represents some kind of intuition, like he can sense things that other people miss.
So he's more than just a cute, fluffy cat. He's a sign that things aren't always what they seem, kind of like Diagon Alley itself.
Exactly. On the surface, it's this amazing, exciting place. But under that, there are secrets and dangers and all this stuff that's connected that Harry's only starting to figure out.
And that brings us to the Monster Book of Monsters. That scene in Flourish and Blots is hilarious. But do you think there's a deeper meaning to those crazy textbooks?
Maybe they're a metaphor for magic itself, like raw power, out of control. It can be just as dangerous as any dark creature. It's a reminder that even knowledge can be dangerous if you don't respect it.
So even normal stuff like textbooks can be dangerous if you don't handle them right. That's a pretty intense message, don't you think?
Totally. It's a lesson that Harry's going to learn again and again. But for now, he's still stuck between loving Diagon Alley and realizing that something bad is probably going to happen.
My mind is blown. We found so much symbolism and foreshadowing in this chapter. So what's next? What other stuff can we discover about this Diagon Alley trip?
Well, don't forget about that spooky book Harry found, Death Omens.
Oh.
It's not just a coincidence. It's directly connected to the threat from Sirius Black.
Yeah, that book is like a giant warning sign. But Harry seems to be ignoring it completely.
He does. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll talk about why he might be doing that and what could happen because of it.
All right, deep divers, welcome back for the final part of our journey through Diagon Alley. And man, after our last discussion, I'm just full of questions.
Yeah, it's crazy how much meaning is packed into every little detail of this chapter. Rowling really knew how to foreshadow things and use symbols.
Right. We've gone from the firebolt to crazy biting textbooks to a ginger cat. It's been a wild ride.
And all those different things, they all point to one main idea. Harry's growing up. He's leaving behind that childhood innocence and realizing that the wizarding world is a lot more complicated and dangerous than he thought.
So this Diagon Alley trip, it's like a mini version of his whole journey.
Yeah.
A preview of all the challenges and choices he's going to face in the books.
Exactly. It's that moment where he starts to see the truth. Even in a magical world, there are consequences and sacrifices and hard truths you have to face.
Speaking of hard truths, let's get back to Sirius Black. We were talking about how Harry doesn't seem too bothered by him, more worried about Hogsmeade than an escaped prisoner. What's up with that?
Well, think about it. Harry's idea of danger is different because of everything he's been through. He's defeated Voldemort twice. Everyone tells him Dumbledore will protect him. It's almost like he doesn't believe anything truly bad can happen to him.
So you're saying his naive attitude, it actually comes from how strong he is and how much he trusts the people around him.
Exactly. But it also shows how tough it is for the adults, like the Weasleys. They want to keep him safe, but they also know he needs to learn how to handle danger on his own.
Right. They're in a tough spot, wanting to tell him everything, but also not wanting to freak him out. But like we talked about before, could that actually backfire? What if hiding the truth just makes things worse later?
It could. Imagine if Harry finds out they knew more than they said. He might not trust them anymore, and he might start doing risky things because of it.
It's like they're trying to keep him a little kid forever. But he's not. He's seen dark stuff. He's been through it.
He has. He's faced death and come out the other side. And maybe a part of him knows that he can't always rely on others to save him. He has to be strong himself.
And that brings us back to the firebolt. He really wants it. It's this awesome symbol of freedom and power, but he chooses to wait.
Right. And that shows how mature he's becoming. He's not just going for what he wants right away. He's thinking about what's really important.
It's like he's realizing that real power doesn't come from having the coolest stuff. It comes from inside you.
Exactly. The firebolt, it could have been a way for him to avoid facing his fears, but he decided to wait, to face those fears head on.
Okay, so Harry's dealing with a lot. Trust, responsibility, the dark side of magic. But we can't forget about the good stuff too, like his reunion with Ron and Hermione.
Oh, yeah, that's such a great moment. Their friendship, it's like a light in all the darkness. It reminds us that even when things are scary, you can still have fun and be with people you love.
It's like a little bit of normal in this crazy world.
And the fact that they're just being kids while all this other stuff is going on, it makes it even more powerful. It reminds us what Harry's fighting to protect.
And then there's Crookshanks, Hermione's new cat. That cat might be more important than we think.
You know, you're right. Crookshanks and his thing with Scabbers, he's not just a pet. Maybe he represents intuition. Like he can sense things other people can't.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Diagon Alley, what are the big things we should take away from this chapter?
I think it reminds us that growing up is about discovering new things, facing your fears, and figuring out what's true, even when it's hard. It can be scary, but it's also amazing, and it shapes who you become.
And it's never easy. There are going to be ups and downs and times when you don't know what to do, but there will also be awesome moments and people who love you and will be there for you.
Exactly. So as we move on to Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, I think we're going to see Harry deal with all these things. He'll face new challenges, figure out what he's truly afraid of, and discover what it really means to be brave and make sacrifices.
This has been an awesome deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explored Harry's time in Diagon Alley. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep the magic alive.